Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Brian.
We're here to talk about The Fast and the Furious, starring Paul Walker, Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster, Tom Barry, Ted Levine, Chad Lindbergh, Matt Schultz, and Rick Yoon. Directed by Rob Cohen, released in 2001 on a $38 million budget, grossed $207 million at the box office, and I don't know if it's fair to say this one launched the franchise into what it is now. That's more like what Part 4's job was, I think. But this definitely started a thing, and I remember it distinctly. And we're covering this on Film Strip now because in an offline conversation once, Lindsey was like, oh, yeah, my Brian can quote that movie end to end. And I'm like, well, sold. So, Brian, last week we were doing some Top Gun Maverick, so we're right back in your wheelhouse here again, man. So you're the expert. What's your background with the Fast and Furious, man?
My background is my fiance does tend to give me a little too much credit sometimes. It's definitely a favorite movie, and there's quite a bit of it that I can quote without issue. But that's kind of my background with it. It's really just one of those things. It's always been a favorite. There's certain aspects of it that have been something that I've just never really forgotten about, and certain things that you kind of remember from when you're growing up, and even now today, I kind of have a guilty pleasure for those giant spoilers, the massive whale tails that we remember seeing in these movies. Mm-hmm. So that kind of wraps it up. I hope that answers it for you.
For just a little bit of added sprinkles onto that, Brian likes to say he collects those spoilers every time he sees a whale tail on the back of a car. He adds it to his mental Rolodex collection.
That is quite a thing to keep in mind, because I don't know about where y'all grew up. I didn't see a lot of those growing down in Alabama, but I do remember when this movie came out because it was right at the summer right before I finished grad school, I think, and I was working full time. I'd finally gotten into the career stuff, and so I was in this phase of life where I really wasn't doing movies that much, but everybody wouldn't stop talking about this thing. And so I was like, okay, what's the big deal? And so I went and saw it. And I think I kind of knew who Paul Walker was because I'd seen Varsity Blues and I'd seen The Skulls, I think. And that's really what got him this gig, I understand, because Rob Cohen directed that. And I thought, okay, it looks, the trailer looks okay. Sure, we'll go for it. And I remember going to see it in theaters with some buddies and being like, okay, yeah, that was kind of cool. And why are we ripping off DVD players? But okay, sure. And I just thought it was just okay, big dumb action movie. 20 something years later, I mean, it's this whole thing. And I'm like, man, of all it's like that joke of I tell people all the time, I'm like, raise your hand if on your bingo card you had Everclear as the post grunge band that would still be around. I didn't this was not the one I would have picked, but okay, Fast and Furious it was a thing, and it definitely was a cultural hallmark, right? Of when car culture just sort of took over the youth zeitgeist for a little while. And I don't know, I'm as far as being a car guy, I can do basic maintenance on my own car, but all this kind of stuff I could never do. But I did grow up driving Hondas, so I sort of have an affinity for some of what this movie's about. But yeah, I that part of it never really hit me. So I didn't do street racing and that kind of stuff, and didn't really know anybody that did any of that kind of stuff, but I did think it was, it looked cool at the time. So either of you, Lindsey, are you a lead foot drag racer yourself secretly, or?
I definitely have a lead foot, and I have a reckless driving ticket to prove it on my record. But, but yeah, I remember I too went to see this movie at the theater. I was in high school at the time when it came out, so everyone was going to see it. Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, huge heartthrobs at the time. And this movie, I think the year prior, Gone in 60 Seconds had come out. And so this was a different flavor of that. But like a better, this was like the Ben and Jerry's version of the of the Walmart brand ice cream that was gone in 60 seconds.
Gone in 60 Seconds is its own like thing, and I could talk for days about some of the acting choices made in that movie, and not even about Nicolas Cage, but everybody else in that movie. But yeah, I definitely think this is influence there, and I mean, you have to go without saying like the Point Break references. I think a lot of people have made that through the years. I actually found out years later, like for a long time, I was like, oh yeah, they just kind of Hollywood recycles everything, whatever. But it was totally like just blind synchronicity. Like they weren't even aware that they were doing that until like, oh yeah, we are kind of just doing that again. And we did sort of cast the blonde Keanu as the lead.
Oh my gosh. He even talks like Keanu Reeves.
That's the scary part, is there's like line moments where you're like, oh, he's not doing that on purpose, though. And look, rest in peace, Paul Walker. No, he's just a bad actor. I mean, this is what he does. Like every movie he's in, he does the same line delivery. I mean, he could have been playing the quarterback in Texas one day. The next day he's playing a rich kid at a prep school, and the next one he's ripping off cars in Coachella, whatever.
But that is how you make money as an actor. Is your typecast, and if you know your typecast, that is half the battle, and then you're golden.
And Vin Diesel is just like a G.I. Joe figure come to life. I mean, that's kind of his whole thing in life.
Yeah, he was actually.
But did he look smaller than you remember?
He did.
Yeah, it's because he actually is small. He's, like that's the other thing. Like Patrick Swayze, also not a very big dude, but a rather buff dude when he was in his heyday, and not a big guy. So Vin Diesel kind of got by on the I'm swole but I'm not tall thing in life, which
he got swoller though.
Yeah, he got bigger. I want to say the pacifier even. I think he was a little bit bigger.
I remember the pacifier as well. Yes, so we
he had he had The Rock to contend with. So I mean,
when you put people up next to that dude, who was an actual defensive lineman at one time or another, that's not really fair to Vin Diesel. But yeah, I remember this though, and again, it's one of those movies, like I say, that definitely hit a moment in culture, and there's a lot to get into when you dig into it. But yeah, I've never done the whole car customization thing, Lindsey. I don't know if you have or not. Brian, has that ever been part of your world life, things that you've been into?
Yeah, pretty much. My first truck, I pretty much rebuilt from the ground up. My first truck, I wanted something that I was able to haul and tow with, but I didn't really have the money for a real truck. And by that, I mean, I really only had the money for like a base model, Chevy work truck. It had rubber floors. It didn't even have a cassette player. It was roll up windows, no tints, no air conditioning, V6 2-wheel drive. That was all it was. But by the time it was sold, it had a fully customized sound system, totally brand new interior, custom exhaust. We had a lift kit on there. It had a CB radio, which paid for itself on more than one occasion. I don't know if you ever watch Smokey and the Bandit or anything like that, but these truckers still do tell people where the police sit and hide. So that was always good to know.
Yep.
But it's fun. It's something I've always done. And we're actually getting ready to fully restore the Jeep Wrangler that I had when I was in high school.
Oh, Not to mention countless tractors and jet skis that you restored.
Yep.
Yes, the jet skis we talked about a little bit on the Top Gun show, but yeah, I knew you did a little bit of that kind of work, so I wanted to set you up for it as well. But just to the Smokey and the Bandit reference, I grew up in Alabama, man. Yes, I watched that movie. I can quote that for you. I mean, some of it I don't.
I would hope so.
But yeah, I know that one quite well, and most of its theme songs too. But, yeah, I know that one well. My brother and I actually have just sort of running jokes. Where we'll just throw lines at each other all the time. I use one as a crossover to football all the time when I'm talking about a bad defense. Like, these guys couldn't close an umbrella, and that's what it's. Jackie Gleason, a comic treasure. Nobody with near that charisma in this movie, but hey, there's some decent people. We get a Bond bad guy in this. And Matt Schultz is a guy that I've seen in other stuff, and I think he was in one of these new metal bands for a while. That's why he's screwing around on a guitar at one point. And you got Buffalo Bill in there. I mean, hey, that was pretty much just walking off the set of Monk and going, let's do that again. Okay. Or playing the cop that he was in Heat. I mean, I'd seen him in other stuff at that point. And, but I didn't know who Michelle Rodriguez and Jordana Brewster really were at the time. And I think, they both went on to become pretty big stars in their own right and do a lot of different things. I think Michelle Rodriguez was just sort of like the sporty friend in movies for like 20 years, and she still looks the same, which means she's at least part vampire. Like that's all.
She's like the badass girl, like she can play a, Navy SEAL, or maybe not a Navy SEAL, but you know what I mean? Like some military lady going into space and like whatever. She's badass.
It's like somebody saw Aliens as a kid and said, I'm going to base my whole acting career about being Vasquez. And that's, she's sort of Vasquez come to life.
She's, in everything she plays.
She really is. Like, if they remade it, she could just be Vasquez. But
again, typecasting actors. That's how you make your money.
Right, and we'll get into a little bit of it. I mean, I even think the guy that they've got in here, Chad Lindbergh, playing the kind of mad scientist, techie engineer kid, is pretty much just like Giovanni Ribisi's stand-in from Gone in 60 Seconds. I mean, they even look the same. So, and I'm not so certain that he wasn't in Boiler Room as well, but. Yeah, the movie was huge, and I guess we should dive into it. So I'm going to try this plot summary here, but in honor of our good friend Ron, I decided I'm going to try to do this as if Ron were here in spirit with us. So here we go. Imagine Point Break, but 10 times more sweaty with a new metal soundtrack replacing surf culture with street racing culture. Brian O'Connor is an undercover cop trying to infiltrate a local street racing gang as the LAPD and feds work together to bust a crew that pulls off high-speed heists of 18-wheelers, hauling DVDs, VCRs, and stereo equipment. Brian befriends the biggest gearhead and muscle beach aficionado of the crews, Don Toretto, a guy with a mysterious past, short temper, and a hot sister. And though some of Don's crew smell a pig from a mile away with Brian, Dom dismisses all of this, especially after Brian and he escape Johnny Tran, a Bond henchman villain archetype who's Dom's main rival and Yakuza or something. I don't know. Brian even courts Mia, Dom's sister, which starts clouding his judgment as it's obvious to everyone, even Detective Buffalo Bill, that Toretto's crew are clearly the ones behind all of this. But after race wars, where the street racers decide to stop breaking the law and just go to the desert to race, and it all goes south when one of Dom's crew loses to Tran but bails rather than pay up, Brian convinces Dom to let him go on the next heist, and that goes bad when the guy who's been pretty sure that Brian's cop the whole time gets his arm shot off nearly and tied up with a vengeful trucker, and Brian swoops in to save him and, of course, reveals he's a cop when he calls in the medevac. Tran's crew comes in after him, and they're finally dispatched in a wild shootout, and Brian chases Dom, and they race one more time, which ends in near death as they both jump through a train straight out of Grand Theft Auto 5, but Dom decides to take his eyes off the road and doesn't see the oncoming traffic, has a huge wreck, but before the cops can get there to sew it all up, Brian gives him his keys and tells him to drive away as he walks off into the sequel and credits roll. And that's basically the Fast and the Furious as it goes down. There's a little bit more. There's a whole scene about tuna fish we're going to have to talk about, and I've got questions. But so there's stuff going on, but I mean, this movie's pretty straightforward. I do want to kind of take a look at our characters and just the way that they all play each other. We've talked a little bit about old Paul Walker here. I gotta say, like, for what he's asked to do in this, I rather enjoy him. I do find him to have a very fun presence. He's just easy to kind of just go with because he's the like super good looking guy, right? But he also looks like he could just be your friend. Yeah,
he's very enjoyable. And his first introduction where he's wearing those Chuck Taylors as he's driving the car, I immediately transported back to high school when, at least in the early aughts, I mean, I don't know if they've ever really gone out of style, but Chucks were everything at that point. Like, it's like, yeah, he's just the cool guy. He's just the cool blonde haired, dude, California guy.
Yeah, not only that, but he's also the friendly guy behind the auto parts counter that also actually knows what he's talking about, which is totally unheard of these days, and it's always so friendly and unexpected when you come across something like that. And just he seems so welcoming too, but just the way he's able to kind of accommodate those orders and interface with the customers, absolutely. Just seems like a regular neighborhood guy.
I mean, you know it now because it's the big twist of the movie, but I'd forgotten, because it's been a while since I've seen this, that they spend about 20, 25 minutes here hiding the fact that he's a cop. And I wanted to ask both of you, like, when they finally reveal that, is that a surprise at all? Because I don't know a time when I didn't know what this movie was about. So it's hard to remember that I know he was a cop from the beginning. Because, I mean, if you didn't know that, you'd think, like, what's the point of all this? Is this guy just trying to get in with the cool kids, or what's he doing, you know?
Yeah. I just assumed, originally transporting back to 2001, I guess, yeah, I just assumed he was some guy like new in town trying to get in. I don't know if I ever, until that point, realized he was a cop. Maybe it was a big twist for me. But when I just watched it again, I was like, oh yeah, this is the point where we find out he's a cop. Like, I don't know.
I'll tell you, I from what I recall, I didn't think he was a cop because he got his butt kicked outside that cafe. Yes, and if he was a cop, to me, I guess I would have thought that he would have been able to at least hold his own, not get pinned on the ground by someone who's roughly about the same size. Now that said, I don't think I was totally surprised, when I kind of did find out he was a cop. But it wasn't something that I would say I did see coming.
I do think this movie does a good job of mixing in the heavy, I guess you'd call it like tech dialogue or whatever. I usually call it like the technology mumbo jumbo of whatever it is, where clearly I don't know what you're talking about, but if you can sell it to me to, convincingly, I'm there. It's the joke, like every mechanic, tells you what they talk about. Like if you listen to NASCAR, which I grew up watching a lot of NASCAR, and you listen to these guys talk about what's going on, you're like, I don't know what the hell you just said, but did it make me go faster? That's what these guys say. But that's funny to watch Paul Walker sort of work in that scene, and he gets in with the street racers, and that opening street race is really cool because they're all looking at him like, what is white bread doing here? But he clearly can hold his own. Like he knows what he's talking about. And that first race is pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, just stage stuff or whatever, but the stonework in this it took me back to a different time. I'm like, oh man, this is after Phantom Menace, but nobody could afford those effects. So we still had to do it the old way. And I kind of miss that. There's something quaint about these movies with it. Because a lot of these Fast and Furious movies, it's a lot of very practical effects with those cars.
Oh, I thought that first race scene was real when he blew past and flipped on the NOS. Could have fooled me.
Yeah, I don't know what that's supposed to do. Brian, please explain to me what exactly nitrous oxide will do for you in a shot. Is it just a shot of adrenaline to an engine?
From what I recall, more or less. I've never put NOS in anything that I've done. But
not in your old truck? No NOS in that.
No NOS in the jet ski?
I blew up without that. I mean, from what I remember, it's a different type of fuel that it injects. It's not something that can burn continuously. And if you do so for too long, it'll blow the engine apart, which is really what ended up happening. But it's nitrous oxide,
Yeah.
I just think it's like anything in these movies. You've got to have something that just looks cool for someone to do besides just driving the car at this insane speed, right? And but the whole bit is that and what I always find funny about these kind of movies is characters are having like dialogue with each other when they clearly cannot hear one another, and they're not supposed to, but they're still having conversations like with each other. Like, no, I'm coming for you, Monica. It was Ja Rule over there doing that. And, Paul Walker's having his own internal monologue, and then Vin Diesel's like, too slow, or whatever, doing his best Stallone. And I mean, it's just funny. I'm like, it hit me this time. I was like, it's funny. These movies, these people are all talking to each other, and they friggin' can't hear each other. They're not hooked together. They're not talking. Like, they're just talking trash into the air.
I thought that too. If you've ever been to a racetrack of any kind, when there are a bunch of cars going with really loud engines, you have to really yell I don't know. What?
I mean, listen to the internal of like a NASCAR, like the driver and the crew that he's talking to. You can barely understand when you come around the end. I mean, that's what it sounds like. But if you close caption it and somebody's actually able to do it, it's like, please be careful on your left. The 43 car's having a bad day. You might want to. That's a Bush brother coming up on you. You might want to move. Things like that. I mean, but I think that's fun though. I mean, it's what makes these kind of things fun. And that racing is pretty cool. I mean, the way they deck those cars out and stuff. But what I love is Paul Walker realizing that he just got his butt kicked like twice in a day. Like he got beat up outside of the fish restaurant hitting on the girl, right? And then he got his butt kicked in a race and he tries to play it off like, oh man, I had you. And then Vin Diesel like does this whole monologue and I'm like, bro, you worship Sylvester Stallone in a serious way.
I like the crowd cheering for each one in different ways, and no matter which way it went, that's the one they were for.
Yeah. Oh, he got you. Yeah. There was also, I never really considered it until now, but the amount of coordination required to hold a race like that is crazy to me. I mean, obviously they do it a lot, so it's, a well-oiled machine. But it's, I don't know. I just never really thought about it. It's
all
definitely not just,
I
people
think there's
showing
one
up
member
and
of the
racing.
gang whose only job is to just listen to the radio and just see when the cops are coming.
Keep an eye out. You got to have someone on cop watch. But I mean, it's really not that different. It's a flash mob with cars.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. Yeah. And it's still done on the Greenway.
That's true.
Yep.
But
it's Lindsey, you and I both do a lot of road running and racing and things like that. And just sometimes I'm thinking to myself in the middle of a long one, I'm like, God, just to think like, okay, I need 4 people here just to constantly point in that direction so people don't go up the wrong hill. And I'm like, yeah, well, I appreciate you because I would be like, which way am I supposed to go? I'm very tired now.
Yep.
So yeah, that's always good to see. But we've seen a lot of Brian there, but I want to get your impressions of Dom because I've sort of led you what I think of him. I mean, I think Vin Diesel is a low rent Stallone and in a lot of ways, and that's okay because that can work in the right scene. And what I'll say about this movie is that they get is that you don't need a ton of him and you don't need a lot of him doing things, but they give him at least 2 monologues in this movie that seem so out of whack for me. And it's when the first one is right. It's when he's taking down Brian for, you didn't even know what you were doing. You were double clutching, you fuck it all up and all this stuff. And then it's later on when he does what I can only call the Phoebe Cates Gremlins thing where he talks about beating the guy half to death with a wrench. And I'm like, well, that did not land well. But otherwise, I mean, I found him to be pretty fun in this movie. Because again, they don't ask him to do a lot, but kind of stand there and look shiny.
And he did that really well, Jay. He's so good at being like, meaty and shiny.
He's a little bit of like the living volleyball scene of the first Top Gun movie. He doesn't really need to do anything but look shiny in the sun.
He's the entire volleyball scene. The first monologue was okay. And the second one, I don't think it was his acting that was the issue with it. I think it was the writing was more, I mean, you needed the exposition, like it needed to be in there somehow. We needed to know why he beat this guy half to death, but it kind of came out of nowhere. Like he's just opening his heart to someone he just met and barely knows. And it seemed a little out of character, but I don't think that's Vin Diesel's fault. I think he did what he could with it. And I thought he did an excellent job being meaty and shiny and delivering those monologues.
Have either of you ever seen This Is Spinal Tap?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, this don't mean anything, but I'm going to say it anyway, and I'll cut it out later. So what you're basically saying is that Vin Diesel was Stonehenge in danger of being crushed by a dwarf. And so I need you to go watch that movie so now you'll get that joke.
I think I own it. I've just never seen it. I have it I have it on DVD and it never made its way to a player.
You need that in your life, let me tell you.
I mean, with that one scene in the garage, I would agree. It as something absolutely needed to be said. It certainly came off a little random, but the feeling I got is that he was trying to go for that brotherly relationship where, you kind of share certain things that maybe you're not so proud of that kind of makes you a little more human, maybe a little more relatable. And yeah, he absolutely just met him, but I don't know how you're supposed to kind of develop these relationships in a 2-hour movie or so. It's kind of tough, but a lot of the street racing does happen pretty fast. He didn't know him for too long, but in the times that he did know him to this point, those times have been some pretty committed risks, taking him, running him from the cops, helping him out there, doing other street races with him, showing up with a car with what he was supposed to show up with. And then kind of going above and beyond and claiming to break into different garages to figure out what other people were going to run. I mean, it's not like I just met this guy at the door. He's kind of given me a little bit to this point. So I think I could kind of share a little bit with them at this point.
That is fair. I mean, Vince does call him out when they first get back to the house party after they've run away from the cops, and apparently the Yakuza show up too. We'll get to Johnny Tran in a minute. But he finally gets him back home for the house party, and Vin Diesel's like, I brought him over here because he's the only one that stood up for me. And like, you get this sense that like Brian is like, yes, all I had to do was be a good Boy Scout to this guy, and all of a sudden I'm his best friend. Which, I mean, sure, I get it. I mean, we're just telling the quick bonding story because they got to have something to connect over. What I think is funny, and you called it out, when they catch him like breaking into those different warehouses, he's doing police work. And of course, Vince knows, like, this guy's a cop. Like, he's like Scott Evil over here, like, just shoot him. Just shoot him and then we're right. And no, he's not a cop. I promise he's not a cop, which Dom is so wrong, incredibly wrong the whole movie about that. But Vince knows it. And I love how Paul Walker has to lay off the worst bullshit lines he can. Like, man, I can't lose again, man. I gotta find an edge. He's like, so you're breaking into what? And Vin Diesel buys that. I'm like, bro, are you sure you're the ones ripping off the heist? Because we got to talk about those heists, y'all. Those are insane. They got harpoon.
Not only bought the excuse, but then took it a step further and went with him to Tran's garage.
Right.
To check things out.
Like, this is a great idea.
What a great idea. Let's go do this. Let's all go do this.
Let me help you do your police work.
But Dom and Brian they love each other so much. They just see what they want to see in the other person the entire movie.
I mean, I have this secret theory that like Dom is like, man, Mia, I love you. You're my sister, but you cost a lot of money. Can you get out the house? And he's like, you know what? This white boy seems to have something going on. Let me get her married off, and then I can move on. I don't know. That's maybe just my own personal theory. But
see, I think a little bit differently. I think Mia is his marketing and advertising for the cafe. Dom's back there in that little back room, not really doing anything. They don't really have anything that great out front. And as long as I don't know what the woman version, I guess for meaty and shiny would be, but that's kind of the female version. To help bring customers in, and it certainly worked.
Yeah, Jordana Brewster pretty much took the scene she was in this and gave it to whoever made that Texas Chainsaw remake she was in. It's like, you just need me to be sweaty in some jeans. Here you go. I'd do that all day. Bless her heart. They give her nothing to do except look sweaty and kind of, make eyes at Paul Walker, which, I mean, to hear her tell about it was not.
And she did it, yeah.
Well, I mean, to hear her tell the stories, it was like, this is not a hard assignment. Like, it was okay. Like, her and Paul apparently were like good friends, and so she had a good time with it. But I like that she's supposed to be like this. She's the straight one, like the good one, right? She doesn't know what's going on. I'm like, bro, let me just tell you right now, everybody in this family knows what's going on. Like, everybody knows what's going on. They all know who the criminal. Like, it is what it is. Like, they play it off as if it's victimless crime, right? Because we're not really hurting anybody except we're blowing these trucks to smithereens, basically, to steal all this shit. But yeah, it's like, oh, it's just a bunch of VCRs or whatever, Like, she doesn't seem to have any real problem with it. And that's what makes this neat, is because she describes the group of everybody together when they having like the Sunday dinner thing or whatever, is that they're not necessarily a family. They're just like a crew, and they're a gang, and they're running all that. And that gave me the same thoughts that you had, Lindsay, about Gone in 60 Seconds. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember like when, we had everybody around, and there's big Vinny Jones over there, and a couple of like Scott Conn I think's hanging out. There's a bunch of random people eating barbecue with whatever in the hell Angelina Jolie is doing in that movie with her hair, and that's the same thing going on here. It's just the same kind of dynamic. But to me though, the Gone in 60 Seconds group seems so like just fake and just ridiculous. And these people, like, you start to buy it. Like I kind of buy that they have camaraderie together.
Very believable. They're grilling out together, drinking Coronas, having a good time.
Yeah, product placement 101, by the way. Speaking of marketing.
So much product placement. There's a Red Bull, NOS.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the product placement on the cars.
All the Mopar.
My dad loved drinking NOS.
the energy drink?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do they still make that?
Yeah. I actually asked the same question when we were watching it. It was exactly the same like logo and everything, but crazy.
That's what got me through those long summer landscaping days.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
the
man.
things we do.
It was NOS and Rockstar. Those were the two energy drinks.
Only the healthiest drinks.
Yep.
I mean, well, I think I remember that movie that, shoot, I just forgot his name now. Paul Rudd was in where he plays like a sales rep for one of like the energy drinks or whatever, and it makes you just piss like.
Oh yeah, that's Role Models.
Yes, I love that movie, and I love the send up that it is on the energy drinks. Like, so high school kids don't do drugs, drink this incredibly concoction, it's gasoline, or whatever. No, the only thing that was missing from like all the, I guess you call it like the garage scenes and stuff like that, the montages they do, is like I really wanted them to continue to haze Brian more to see if he really knew what he was doing. The fact that he does is kind of neat, and I'm wondering, like, did the cops like just do a survey? Because you learn his backstory in future movies, so I kind of have to put that out of my head that I know sort of where he came from. They don't tell you any of it in this. Like, did they just sort of go through the academy and go like, anybody in here ever like work on a car? And like, he was the one dude like, yeah, I actually know what I'm doing. I don't know. It's just funny to find the most unique skill set on earth, because that's not something you just pick up. Like I'm sure, Brian, you didn't just one day decide I was going to tear my whole truck apart. Like, you had to figure out how to do that at the time.
You would think so. But that's more or less exactly what happens.
No, I'm saying, like, you learn it by doing it. Like, you don't just one day go like, oh yeah, that guy, you go and be the infiltrator of the motorheads. Like, you have to like have done it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of get it though. You figure there's got to be thousands of LA cops, right? It's not totally unheard of or I can't think that it would be totally out of the question to send out a bulletin to say who in your precinct, or do you have anyone that's an absolute gearhead? Because I know personally, I actually do have cop friends that are gearheads. Mm-hmm. So that aspect kind of was highly relatable for me. But to send out a bulletin to a group of police officers and say, is anyone here really interested in cars or know the scene really well? Late 90s, early 2000s, I don't think you would have had a problem finding anyone. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they were kind of able to find someone that was law enforcement, but also knew what they were doing with a wrench didn't totally surprise me. A lot of guys go down that route. It's something very cool to do. And when you're in high school, there's a whole car building scene. I wasn't really a part of it then. But a lot of those guys kind of continued along that route. Some guys continued along that route for a little bit and then went off to the academy. So for me, I guess I kind of do get it. So it's not really that unheard of.
I mean, it is a cool thing, but the funny bit is when they finally do reveal as a cop and they arrest him because they got to make it look good on the street, and they take him to the Hollywood mansion that they've just sort of taken over. And what I love
is some things never change.
Right. I mean, well, yeah, he's doing it, but what I love is that he calls out Levine for like knowing the history of this house is built for Liz Taylor or whatever, and he turns around and he says to his captain, where he was like, see, even the cops in Hollywood are Hollywood. And I was like, exactly. But to be even more sent up, when you go inside, they got all those massive, like, compact 386s on the ground, right? I know the computer stuff. And so they're all burning up tons of, that room probably was 100 degrees just with the fans blowing up those computers. And they're all sitting there and they're trying to, like, being tough and, talk back and forth. And Levine in his Buffalo Bill voice is like, why don't we all have an iced cappuccino? I'm like, what? What is
a
this?
decaf one nonetheless.
I what's the point? So,
It's like an ice cream drink at that point.
My first job was as a barista, and we would call that a why bother.
Thank you. Yes. As my father told me early on, he's like, let me tell you something, son. Decaf coffee is of the Satan, and we don't worship that. So we do not worship that in this house. Give me leaded or let me die. And so, that's what he called it.
Absolutely,
I'm old enough to remember leaded gas. So,
Yeah, no, we're a leaded coffee kind of household for sure.
No doubt. But, because anyway, I love that, though. I love that there's, again, you've got all these good character actors in this movie. And for a movie like this, and Rob Cohen is really good at this, is like doing these kind of B picture sort of things that were really popular in like the 70s. And they just sort of come around every 20 or 30 years. And you don't spend a ton of money on them. You make a lot of money off of them. They kind of become these cultural pieces. But the way to pull them off is you've got to have good character actors. Because if you have like big stars, then it sort of overshadows the movie or whatever. And you staff these things with good character actors when you have these ensemble pieces, it works. Tony Scott was a genius with this. Like all of his 90s and 2000s movies, if you look at them, are loaded with, there's maybe one or two stars, but they're loaded with people that you could just drop into different parts and stuff. And that's the same here. I love all these different little people that are a part of this, and they just kind of come and go from the scene. I mean, I think that there's the guy that they're basically running the front out of his like auto parts store, like high-end auto parts store, but they basically are making him work for free because he's a convicted felon. So they're like, no, you will be our front with our cop. And so they got him. And then we got to talk about the misdirection bad guy in Johnny Tran, Rick Yoon, who I've seen in so many things, but I will always remember him from Die Another Day, the Bond flick where he gets a diamond shot in his face.
Yeah.
And he is about 7 layers of ridiculous in that movie. And he's no less in this. I mean, I got a kick out of him.
He's got a great, I feel like he could cut glass with his cheekbones.
Right? I mean, like
10
years before, he would have been the bad guy in one of the Karate Kid sequels. And I'm surprised they haven't brought him back on Cobra Kai for something.
Yeah, he's got that piercing look for sure.
Yeah.
He's got it down pat.
He's ready to go. I do like the scene where they bust up his family and his dad is just like he gives the I'm disappointed, but then you find out he was like, but not so disappointed. I'm not going to pay your bail. Like, come on, let's be real.
Yeah. It was like
we do have plenty of money.
Right. Like you get the sense that they are like mafia or something. They're all crooked, but he got him in trouble, and this is sort of his hobby. But what I love is his little henchman. And I mean, like little in the
in the snakeskin pants.
Yeah, the little guy that's always looks like he's like, you talk about loaded on caffeine or cocaine or something, and he's always pointing his gun like, I'm ready to go. I mean, he's shooting up the world. I guess everybody has to have a toady. I mean, in the world,
but he got taken down the hardest.
Yeah,
in that scene.
Yeah, you knew he was going to die, like seriously though.
Oh yeah, but no, I'm talking about the police break-in initially, because he got up and ran, and then more or less got immediately clotheslined across the face, and then brought down straight to his back. Mm-hmm. I mean, he got decked.
When they do the big raid, I think Brian's in on some of that too. Yeah. So no,
he left his feet.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it was a good scene, but I like the fact that they have this whole sense that again, as I said in the plot summary, if it's not obvious that it's clearly Dom's group because they're the only ones that can drive like this, doing all of this, we'll give you an excuse to maybe think it's not for 8 minutes. And
well,
I was like,
to be fair, Clark Griswold did it first. Do you want to give credit where credit's due?
That is also.
It was the first, because that was in the first scene of the movie. We see them go under that semi, and I was like, "Oh, I'm getting a lot of Christmas Vacation vibes here."
Okay, I got to go a little further back though. I've seen Smokey and the Bandit, and Burt Reynolds hides his Trans Am underneath Jerry Reed's truck a few times doing that. Seen that. I think one of Sheriff Justice's best lines is as he is about to crash through one, as he tells his deputy son, "Duck, are you going to be talking out of your ass?" And so, they take the top off of that Pontiac Bonneville. But no, I love that. I love all that weaving in and out and stuff. And I mean, it wasn't the actors, but they got real drivers doing that shit. And I'm like, that is pretty crazy.
Nuts.
Like, I mean, I know stunt people you got to be on a different level to pull that off anyway. But what's crazy is that they convinced Matt Schultz, the director, and the stunt people, like, no, bro, you need to be hanging off the end of this semi truck with, like, you're not really getting your arm basically cut off by this wire, but you need to be up there doing it because we can't do it with a stunt person. It'll look weird. So they convinced this guy who had no training at all to do it. They're yanking this semi down the highway at 70 miles an hour, and he's hanging up there. So they inducted him into the Stuntman Guild after that because he
That's
did so
awesome.
well. And he was like, he said, "Can you see the look of terror on my face?" He said, "I thought I was going to die."
It played really well on camera, though.
I mean, it really isn't good. I mean, the action in this movie is really intense. I mean, to borrow the line, it is very fast and it is very furious, and it makes it fun. I mean, because you just go from beat to beat to beat. There's maybe about 20 minutes of the movie where it tries to kind of slow down, but even then, it's just montage it all over the place. So this movie never really stops. It's pretty much hitting the gas the whole time.
It really is,
and I think that's why it's still around, because it's something that to everyone today, it's still hitting the gas. It's still fun, and something like this is, to me, it's timeless. I don't know that it's ever really going to lose its edge.
Well, let's talk about the way the heists go down and how they do them, like the stunt piece that it is. But also, does it need to be that elaborate if you just want to rip off a truck of DVD players? I mean, they've got a harpoon gun going. You got 3 cars zipping in between. It's like there's some Batman level shit going on here to try to steal the truck.
I'm not sure what the ROI is on a truck full of DVD players. Maybe at the time, like DVD players weren't that.
I mean, it's got to be
they were
pretty,
still expensive.
It's got to be pretty good.
What would they be taking down today, though?
PS5s.
Yeah.
But where are they?
I was going to say, can you find a truck of those? I don't know that there are that many of them. Yeah.
No.
You know what? No, they would be doing crypto or something right now. So
the mad scientists would be making all their money.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what they would be taking down today. And as these movies have progressed, the heists have kind of gone away. Like the last good one was the first one that The Rock was in, and they drag a safe through like Brazil, basically, with a couple of Fords or a couple of GTOs. Which I mean, I'm not gonna lie and didn't tell you I thought it was cool. It's also ridiculous, but yeah, it's fun, But I mean, I think when they started like racing a tank down the Autobahn was when I was like, okay, we've just kind of gone into a different level now. We're not really stealing anything anymore. We're just doing crazy shit to do it. And I haven't seen the last one. I understand. I mean, I haven't seen the last one. I understand they went to space, and I'm like, it took you 9 movies, to finally get there. But
I haven't seen the last one either.
I haven't either.
But that's all I know about it is apparently there's some bit of space to it. But I mean, I thought it was cool. I mean, they do have a whole bit about like there's a local fence that you can move all these through. I'm like, bro, where are you? Are there that many pawn shops to roll those DVD players through, or are you just shipping them back somewhere else? Like, I don't know. I was impressed with the. There was like this whole network of crime to happen, and this movie is not interested in explaining all of it to you. Like this is a Michael Mann movie; they'd spend an hour on that, but I kind of wanted it, I guess, because I'm in that mindset when I'm watching this. I'm like, but why? Because like in Point Break, you just steal the money from the bank. Like I see the cash, I know what happens, but there's like a lot of transactions that have to happen. Well, now I've got the DVD player, now I got to move it.
Yeah, but like. Okay, in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they stole from semis that were just parked on the street and unloading stuff. So
fair.
Maybe it was something like that, Shredder's underlayer of reselling.
Look, crime costs money to pay for, kids. We got to fund it some way. I mean, I just think back.
Some more VCRs.
I think back to Axel Foley and his stolen cigarette truck in the original Beverly Hills Cop. Federal tax stamp. You can't get any more legit than that. So, you wonder if look, it's even got the sticker on it. So from Panasonic, can you see it? It's pretty obvious to make sure that the box is clear when they're ripping it off. But
being a trucker is terrifying.
Okay.
I carry a shotgun too.
There's a whole subplot they cut out of this though, and I kind of wish they had put on it because the cops talk about it in this movie that the reason there's a ticking clock is that we've got to find out who's doing this because the truckers union has mobilized and they're going to take matters in their own hands. And it was going to be the third act was supposed to be the truckers at war with the race car drivers. And I'm like, the hell yes, bring that. I wanted to see more of that because nameless murderous, I just called him JT Walsh trucker because he probably was him, that character actor, this murderous trucker versus the street racers. I was here for it. That would have been cool. It's like Duel meets Point Break. It would have been a blast.
I just think the whole thing could have been avoided if Dom's crew cut the truck driver in on the takedown. It's really that simple. Pay him off a little bit. It's an insurance claim. I think the mafia used to do it in New York. But
yeah. I mean, so why let's
thinking it through.
I like the way Brian thinks here. It also scares me just a little bit, but you're right. We can do this a lot less messier if we just pay the dude off.
Do it that way.
But then we wouldn't have a movie. Then we wouldn't have.
True. It would be the slow and the tedious at that point.
The slow and the friendly.
Yeah, exactly. This would not be nearly as fun that way. But no, I do what did y'all make though of because I got questions. Why did Jesse, who is the mad scientist engineer kid, whatever, decide all of a sudden, no, I've got to not only race at Race Wars, I got to race the fastest dude out here not named Dom. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? And I don't understand his motivation for doing that. Who was he trying to prove anything to?
His dad, for when his dad gets out of prison. Oh, that was what he said. He wanted to win so that he had another car or something. He wanted to make his dad proud when his dad got out of prison. And I don't know, maybe his dad was close to getting out of prison and he just felt like he needed to do something.
Win him a car.
Yeah.
What else do you do when your dad gets out of prison?
Yeah, because he hadn't, finished high school or gone to college or anything like that. But he does all this really crazy stuff with cars that, should have put him in MIT, according to Paul Walker. So
right, I got a kick out of his floppy disk of doom with that incredible schematic that he had going there. I'm like, bro, that's actually pretty good. In 2001, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, computers can do that shit.
I've never seen that on a floppy disk.
That to me was the most unrealistic part of the movie. There's no way you could get that much data on a floppy disk.
You'd have had 2 zip disks to make that work. And even then, it probably would not have run that fast. That computer it would have barely turned. Yeah, that was a little bit of movie magic for us there. But he runs away. That's really what sets the third act into all hell breaking loose. He runs away, and Johnny Tran is like, man, I was going to kill all y'all anyway, but now I guess I'm going to do it early. Okay. Meanwhile, Brian is like, no, I want in. You got to cut me in. We're down a guy because, it takes 5 guys to do this job. That, again, if we just pay the trucker off.
Smart.
Brian's right, but no, we did it the hard way. So, but I love how Brian does swoop in here and reveals himself. And I'll give Vin Diesel this, the look on his face when Brian's going Officer O'Connor, 45412, I need a medevac. He looks at him like, son of a bitch, I can't believe this idiot rode down here bleeding out on the desert was right and I was wrong, and you're tapping my sister. I'm gonna kill you 4 times. It's just the look on his face. It was amazing. I got a real kick out of that.
And it lingered.
Yeah, they left it on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't just they really bit into that.
The look to me was if you weren't going to save my friend, I would kill you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a twinge of sadness in his eyes too. Like I kept waiting for like this single tear to go. I'm like, 'cause they left it on him so long. I'm like, man, they really want Vin to go through the emotions with this. Like he's supposed to really be crushed by this whole.
I wonder
thing.
how many times they had to do that scene to get it just so.
I know. I don't know, man, but he let it all go. I mean, that was definitely his face moment for this. But of course, we got to keep going because not only is my friend bleeding to death in the desert, and the truckers got away. So I've blown my heist. But I've got to go find my engineer friend because the Johnny Tran gang is coming to shoot me all. So like everything that could have gone bad that Thursday happened.
It was not a good day for Dom.
It's gonna be a long day.
It was, yes, that was not good. But you talk about somebody that got taken down hard. Poor Jesse got shot to hell and back. Man, they killed him 3 times. It was. I was surprised the level of violence in a movie that was PG-13. I understand they had to cut that down a good bit to keep from getting an R rating because it was pretty vast.
I actually said when the movie started, I didn't realize this was PG-13. I thought it was, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't remember what it was. Like movie ratings mean nothing to me anymore. So it's,
Look, I was disappointed he got shot. I'm going to start there, but let's also point out if someone is looking for you, I'm not going to park my totally in your face car in the middle of the street and then start walking up the sidewalk to a house that I regularly frequent to go hide.
Yes.
You're kind of putting yourself on display. He's got a garage. Could have parked the car back there, brought the car in up on the lawn, a little something, Well,
he wasn't really, he's got ADD. He doesn't think things through sometimes, He's thinking about other stuff. He's focused on other stuff.
But he is intelligent with all those designs he put together. Like he's able to solution things. He can see a problem through. I just found it interesting that they chose to do it in that manner, I guess.
I felt like
movie.
I felt like they were at a point where they're like, we just need to let Johnny Tran's group get him and kill him because then that'll set Dom and Brian, like the enemy, my enemy is my friend. They have to team up even though they know the truth about each other at that point to go take down these bad guys. We have to have an excuse for that to happen, and we just need to let it go. And I'm sure someone in the room was like, see, he's going to park the bright white and silver car that he pretty much just stole out in the broad daylight.
Right.
But sure. I mean, yeah, it is a little bit of a means to an end. I was like, well, that was a little perfunctory, but I guess we were getting to the point where we needed to get it done. So,
yeah.
But I wanted him to live too. I'm like, if you're Johnny Tran, isn't it more like, you know what, we could shoot this dude, and I'm justified in doing so in my own like evil Yakuza way. But maybe just maybe we shoot him in the foot and we make him come to work for us. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what they did with Ted.
Yeah.
He force fed him oil, and then he had to go find the engines.
Exactly.
Yeah, they kind of. Yeah, it was like a weird waterboarding, but oil boarding.
Oh, the minute he started going like, "Do you think 30 weight or 40 weight?" I'm like, "Oh man, I forgot. We're gonna make this boy eat some oil." Like, it was coming. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's."
Oh, he's about to get pumped full.
I thought he was gonna die. Honestly, I was like, "Oh, does he die?" I don't remember this part.
Yeah,
but.
And maybe that's Johnny Tran's fatal flaw. He can't see of turning more people onto his side. He just destroys in front of him. He doesn't have the vision, which is why he dies of a horrendous death. And so he gets sideswiped by a couple of cars. But yeah, so we dispatch those dudes, but we got to have one final race. And I got to say, I love that Dom's like, I'm going old school, and he breaks out the big muscle car. That was cool. I'm like, yeah, no, that's pretty sweet. But I wanted to know, and I don't know, so I got to ask, Brian, I'm leaning on your knowledge here. Is there any way that Supra would have kept up with that car in real life? Are they that evenly matched at that point?
It's possible, I suppose. I mean, those two JZ engines were very popular, and you can modify them to a pretty big extent. I mean, what you're looking at here is power to weight ratio.
Right.
What Dom had is obviously a much larger, heavier, full steel tank. And then what Brian had was significantly lighter. front wheel drive. And of course it's from a physics perspective, it's easier to pull than push. So what Dom had was a rear wheel drive car. So yeah, it's possible that they could have been able to keep up with each other like they did.
I also wonder if at any time Dom as the character would have been like, all I got to do is just jerk a little bit to the left and his car is going to be a billion pieces and mine's going to have a scratch on it. Because that is also a physics problem that I understand.
Yeah, especially when they wheelied up.
Yeah. Right? At that point, yeah, you think it would have known at that point. But it's a pretty great race, though. For something that's supposed to be a 10-second race, this movie does a good job of putting you in the driver's seat of that. Seems like really fast, but it may go by very slowly when you're trying to do the 400 things at once you've got to do to be able to make that work. I got a kick out of the last race, mostly that they both made the train jump. And in the celebration is when Dom's like, oh shit, there's a truck pulling out in front of me. And and if he had been in Brian's car, he would have been a billion pieces. But the fact that he was in that hunk of metal, he survived that incredible roll flip.
That's true. My first thought was, oh my God, was he wearing his seatbelt? I don't remember if he was wearing his seatbelt. I know he lives because he's in a bunch more movies. But...
Right. It's not Tom. It's his.
And then he just crawls out the window like.
Yeah. That felt like
shiny meat stick Vin Diesel.
That felt like a good 80s movie trope, though. Like these guys can do these insane things and then walk out with it's dusty. Again, he's very slow in that moment.
Was that movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger was like, oh, last action hero?
Yeah.
Where Arnold Schwarzenegger was the action hero. And then
pretty much all of the 80s Arnold flicks were that. I dare anyone to go watch Commando, and the things that he talk about feats of physics, the things that man does in that movie are insane. But okay, so we get to the last moment here where Brian's like, no, I owe you the 10-second car. So he lets him off the hook. He lets him go away. And I wanted to get both of your interpretations. Why do you think he let him go?
Because he values respect more, really, than anything else, and that was kind of a foreshadow at the beginning of the movie with that first race. Mm-hmm. And to me, there was a little bit of that locking eyes, like you and me are here for the respect, and everyone else here, all these kids are really kind of here for the money and the show, but what we're both here for is kind of the reputation and the street cred is really what we're looking for. I kind of I did like it. It did make sense to me with why he let him go.
Yeah. I think he found his family and he recognized that too. I mean, there are a few lines where his boss, I mentioned, some family you choose or something. I can't remember exactly what the exact line was, but he said, you need to think about that. Yeah. And I think he thought about that, and I don't know, that Dom was his family at that point.
I mean, I think he even says it to Mia when she finally realizes that he's a cop, and he's revealed that to her. He's like, look, everything I said was me. I'm just, this is just what I do, which is not dissimilar from a lot of other movies I've seen. But no, I like it. I buy it, Brian. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it reminded me that that's what he says when he says he wants to race Dom. He's like, look, I ain't got any money, but I'll race you for the pink slips or whatever. But if I win, you got to give me the respect, because he wants to be not only in the crowd, but you got to say, this guy, he's legit. And so yeah, it is all about the respect. But do we respect this movie enough? I guess it's time for final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for The Fast and the Furious, Brian?
Oh, this is not fair. I'm always biased when it comes to car movies. I mean, this is one of those first really, really good car movies, kind of the 2000s, I would say. It wasn't something like the Cannonball Run. It wasn't a street race from Happy Days or anything like that. It had good action, good character actors in it. For me, it's a large popcorn. It's a timeless classic, and it's always going to be up there for me. Plus, it's a car movie, so I don't know what else to say. I would give it all the fixings, and it would be a good large.
Liz?
Man, I'm a little torn because rewatching this movie, I don't have a ton of like negative things to say about it. It's just a really fun movie. And it's seriously just like clip after clip after clip of these really cool things that is basically made for trailers. So it's just a movie of really sick trailer shots, like for an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes. Like that's all you're watching. And I started taking notes at the beginning of the movie, and then halfway through I just stopped and I just watched it because that's, it's action after action after action. I think for what it is, and it did take me back to my, sophomore year of high school.
You mentioned that on more than one occasion about, just like how much like it reminded you of all those fun times and everything. And I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give it a large popcorn, I think. Yep, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to give it a large popcorn.
They don't make this kind of thing in mass cinema anymore. The big budget B movie popcorn knows what it is, and it's just friggin' fun. It's not going to ask a lot of you. Doesn't need a lot from you. Just get in, buckle up, and have a good time. Literally. And I miss that. I know there's like a whole action movie scene that does this and they exist in lots of places and cool. Do all those, yes. But they don't do this in mass market the way that they did in the 90s and the 2000s. And gosh, I forgot how much I missed it. It really gave me a sense of nostalgia of like, man, they just don't do these anymore. And gosh, I wish they would. And everything comes around another time or another. So maybe they'll do them again at some point. But Jesus, this movie's a lot of fun. I mean, again, I was trying to take notes too. And I was like, I don't know why I'm writing any of this down. I know what's going to happen. I know this movie so well. I mean, I could have wrote that plot summary without thinking about it. The only real thought was trying to jump like Ron. I mean, I was like, I know what happens. It doesn't matter. Is it any fun getting there? And that's half the fun of this movie in particular. Now, this series has its own ups and downs, and there's certain ones that I happen to really like. Again, I haven't seen the 9th one, but I've seen all the other ones, and I think I saw all of them in theaters. And so I, go with them for different things, but just as its own standalone piece of like if they'd never done anything else after this, I gotta say this is a lot of fun, and it was a fun adventure to go on, and it's just a good ride. It's like a roller coaster that I know really well. I've ridden it 100 times, but am I going to get on it again? Yeah. And I'm going to enjoy it just the same, even though I'm old and it's probably going to hurt, but whatever. I mean, you don't put a lot of thought into it. You're going to get a lot from this. This movie is like a big tub of popcorn. And I like that. So I'm large popcorn on it too, man. Fade the haters. This movie's fun. And if you can't have fun with this, like you need to examine your priorities a lot. Like not everything needs to be a Kubrick examination or, I don't need to feel like I'm taking a test. Like every time I watch a Nolan film, I love his stuff, but geez, sometimes I just need this. And no, this was a lot of fun to get into here. And I'm glad we got to talk about it here on the show. So Brian, Lindsey, thanks again for joining me on this episode of Film Strip. Folks, you can follow the show's social media at Film Strip Pod on Twitter for as long as it still exists, Instagram, Facebook, Mastodon, all the other places that are out there. You'll find announcements about upcoming shows, link to our letterbox page. Really just go to filmstrippodcast.com. That's going to take you to all of our distribution site. Massive platform out there, 300 plus episodes, tons of things for you to enjoy. Please share the show on your social media and leave us a positive review. It helps other people find the podcast. Until next time, for Brian and Lindsey, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.